Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 episode 15. It is 9 PM and it is the season finale, so spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So yeah, there was a lot going on getting into this finale, a lot of characters with dangling threads. The episode, as expected, focuses largely on Robbie and the build-up of, is he going to leave, go on the sabbatical, and are we all going to feel worried that he's going to either intentionally hurt himself or just be reckless and possibly get hurt as a result because he just doesn't care anymore. Abbott even calls out this, riding without a helmet and that he's got a death wish and all the rest of it. So we have that, but we also have little bits and pieces for just about every character. Now that's not to say that I think every single character gets a fair share. There's maybe one or two that I think got a little shortchanged this season, and I'll talk about that. But by and large, I really enjoyed this finale, and it kind of felt like some things didn't give you as neat of a wrap-up as you perhaps liked, but it kind of felt true to what the format's supposed to be, which is that this is just one day, and it's not the most important day necessarily of their lives. It's a tough day, it's a long day, some important stuff has happened, but it's not necessarily going to give you a neat resolution to every single character dispute or something, along those lines. And I think, keeping that in mind, I think this is very restrained in a lot of ways, in a good way. Like, it doesn't go for cheap pops in a way that other shows might, and I can appreciate that. But there's a lot of good stuff in here. I especially like the touch at the start of the episode where we start off with Robbie and Alashime talking about her condition, and I really like this. It's a subtle little thing, but they didn't come up with the time and the hour 15 title card until the end of the scene. It wasn't until she left the scene and he's standing there alone where it comes up at the bottom. They let the argument, the debate play out first, and then you got the title. There's a subtle little touch that made it feel a little bit different than normal. And there was more good direction this episode with moments, particularly when Robbie is looking in at like the surgery going on, or he's in there, and because the big case this episode is a pregnant woman who is seriously going through a lot here, and both her and the baby are at risk, and they're trying to save both, and the woman wanted to have like a natural birth, and like a completely natural, like no medical help at all, and it's kind of landed her here, and they have to like take out the baby with a C-section, and they're trying to save the baby at one little table, whilst Robbie and Abbott are trying to save the mother at the main table, and all this is going on, and there's moments where Robbie's just kind of looking over at the baby, and like that group led by Cassie, who he called in, who was kind of already off the clock and just doing charting, but he calls her in for this because it's kind of an all hands on deck situation. And just the amount of performance in his eyes, and the way that the camera would sort of sit on a shot, just him looking over and then looking back at the patient that he's actually working on, and it felt like there was so much like pent up emotion there of like, oh, like this is going to break him if this goes badly. And it doesn't go, luckily they get them both out of the woods and they can both go upstairs for their further treatment, but they had to deal with the initial crisis, and it was looking kind of hairy for a minute. I think all of that was really well done and tense in the way that the Pit usually does. If anything, it kind of was filmed in a way that just made it feel that bit more important emotionally than it perhaps has been all season, just because it did seem like it was going to break him, like he was on the verge of tears with his surgical mask on. And I think that was a good visual. It really sold things. But I mean, honestly, to talk about the rest of the episode, I feel like I'm just going to be running down characters and talking about where they're left off for the end of the season, and any relevant moments that we want to bring up here, because like I said, some get more than others. Robbie obviously gets the most, and there's several moments throughout the episode where, his friend's leaving and says, hey, I'll make sure I come in and get all that treatment if you promise to come back so I can, give your bike a try. And, he plays it off as a joke, but once again, it's someone trying to bargain with him to make him commit to coming back. When Abbott tries to talk to him and says, hey, some people are worried that you're not coming back, and that makes me worried. Let's talk about this. It's one of the standout scenes of the whole episode, is the scene where Abbott actually confronts him, and they have the big heart where Robbie does kind of get upset and kind of admits that he's struggling and that he's messed up and so on. And the key bullet points from this that really stuck with me was one, Robbie saying that, people say that if you see someone die, that a little piece of your soul goes with them, and it's very kind of philosophical, but this idea that he has seen so many people die in his line of work over the years, that and each one's chipped away at him a little bit more and a little bit more, that he's worried that there's nothing left, kind of thing. And Abbott gives this great speech to him, right? And Abbott, obviously he had his own demons. He says that he's sort of found some balance. He's getting over them. He's got a therapist, all the rest of it. But he talks about all the things he's lost. And, last season we found out he'd lost a leg. Here he mentions that he's lost a wife, but he's still wearing the ring, which would indicate that she died, that she didn't, it wasn't a divorce. This was something where she has passed away, which I think is new information. I don't think we knew that before this scene. But he explains to Robbie, hey, like, that mother and baby, we saved them tonight. Like, they're alive because of us. That was me and you and everyone else in the room who did that. That's important. And this place needs you, but you maybe also need this place too much. So yeah, you do need to take time. You do have to go do stuff. He even says, go on a cruise, go and do something that's relaxing. But this daredevil stuff of going across country to somewhere where there's basically nothing there, except maybe the possibility of going Thelma and Louise off a cliff, maybe don't do that, is just an idea. So it was a very genuine scene. It was well acted from both actors, and I think it stuck out because, like, Robbie, Noah Weil, we see him give a good performance just about every week, right? It's never bad, but like, there's been a lot of scenes throughout this season where there's been these moments of raw emotion in his face, where he's holding something back, and we see it again here, and it's very, very good. But Abbott, on the other hand, obviously we don't get him every episode. We go large stretches without him, and when we do get him, he's kind of this cool guy. He's kind of this cool, confident guy for the most part. So it really sort of hit hard when he was getting kind of like raw and a little bit emotional in this sequence. It was really good stuff, and one of several good scenes that Robbie has with other characters in this episode. So really like that. I feel like maybe the most convincing speech that anyone's given him all season. So that was really good. Also, when he finally finds Dr. Al again and says, hey, like, because he talks to, like, I think it's the lawyer, and we'll get to the lawyer scene for Mel's sake later, but he talks to the lawyer, but hey, in theory, hypothetical, if I knew another medical doctor was, had some reason why they shouldn't be, they were impaired in some way, like, where am I there in terms of reporting that? Am I breaking confidentiality, the oath, all that stuff? And so he's bringing it up, it's on his mind, and he finally finds her later on in the episode. And notably, Alashime looks so different at the end of the episode, like in these last couple of scenes with her, because like her hair's not tied back anymore, which is such a simple little thing. It's not even like she had it in a ponytail or anything. It was still kind of down. She just had it kind of sort of tied back at the top, but it still made such a difference. It just felt like she was more, loose and more like laid back. Obviously the scene doesn't stay that way, because when Robbie says, hey, you're kind of unfit to be the attending here, if you freeze up and have a seizure in a moment where you're supposed to be giving critical care, it could result in the patient dying. And notably, the big thing from the earlier scene is that she's had 2 seizures today, and that means that she's supposed to go 6 months with no driving until she's been cleared that she's not had one in 6 months. Which leads to her final scene, which is that when she's out in the car, she, we see her get in the car, she starts the car, and I think most of the audience at this point are thinking, she really should not be driving. Like, as much as Robbie might have been a bit more sensitive with how he approached it, when he said you should not be driving, I think we all believe him that he's right. And sure enough, as soon as she like pulls out of the parking spot, she kind of stops the car after like a few feet and just breaks down in tears because she knows she shouldn't be driving. It's heartbreaking. It feels like she's had all of her confidence, like, because she's been so confident and so like calm as well for the most part. That was the thing that stuck out when Robbie was saying, hey, you're not really fit to do this job, and you're not fit for this, and it's not your decision to make this and this. She got angry. She dropped F-bombs. She brought up him letting Langdon away with taking drugs, and he's like, no, I didn't let him away with it. I made sure he got the help he needed till he was prepared to come back. Effectively saying that he's trying to do the same for her. Not that it's the exact same situation by any means, but we see her get a little bit frazzled, and like that calm demeanor where she's very diplomatic. Now, admittedly, sometimes her diplomacy in earlier episodes like does come off a little cold to the other characters, right? And it's kind of like you can tell they're clashing in kind of a passive aggressive way. But she was always trying to be civil and at least have the courtesy to sort of be polite about everything and try and explain herself. Here, she actually kind of gets mad. She actually unleashes a little bit. So whoever's choice it was to make sure her hair wasn't tied down for this was a great choice, because visually it just added to the performance and her getting pissed off with her hair kind of like moving around a little bit as she was yelling. So good choices there. Emotional final scene with her, that was good stuff. Robbie, who else is he talking to this episode? Obviously Langdon, and this is the interesting thing about the Langdon stuff for me this episode, with Robbie in particular, is that Langdon obviously goes up to check on that patient who he finds out lost a leg. So that's a likeable moment because he cared about his patient. That's like one of his first patients back today that he was concerned about. He went to check on her. That's kind of sweet. But you know, we see him getting doing his test where he has to be watched while he's peeing. So he makes a little joke about that as he's been watched. But you know, he's doing the thing. And it's kind of, I think it's an important little moment because it kind of backs up what he says when he's talking to Robbie later. And, you know, it's not like surprising. Don't get me wrong. It's not like a surprising thing. But this idea that, and people have said it throughout the season, and Langdon's going to say it himself when he talks to Robbie later, is that he's doing the steps. Like, he's doing everything he's supposed to be doing. He's went through rehab, he's doing this, he's doing that, and he's going to be doing these tests for however long. And I think that on some level it was important that we see, yeah, the kind of the worst of this like coming back process, which is that someone has to stand there and watch him fill the cup, because they can't, you know, the whole point is to make sure he can't fake it, he can't swap anything out or in some way trick the system. It's like, no, this has to be monitored. A human being has to watch you urinate into a cup, and just how uncomfortable and awkward that is, and you know, just unpleasant and a little humiliating in many ways. So I think seeing that, well, it's played for a laugh in the moment, because it's like, yeah, of course, he's going to crack a little awkward joke. It's showing that he is going through the steps. There is no trying to skirt around things here. He's not trying to get a fast one and cut one corner or anything like that. He's going through the process, right? So I think that was good. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is that Robbie actually, before he runs into Langdon near the end of the episode, he actually asks, I think it's Dana, maybe it's someone else, but he asks where Langdon is, and is seemingly kind of disappointed that he might have missed them and that Langdon's already left. Which is very interesting that by that point in the episode, he actually wants to have that talk with Langdon. So when he does bump into him, right, and he's, you know, Langdon's coming back downstairs and he's on his way out, he says, hey, I'm sorry we never got a chance to have that talk today, which is so different in demeanor from every other time this has come up all season, where Langdon's tried to talk to him and he's just tried to walk away, he's tried to avoid him, he's tried to not do this. And Langdon asks him, did you really want to have that talk? And he's like, nah, not really. But I think by the end of the day, he knew he should, and he wants to do the right thing. It's not that he wants to have the talk. The talk's going to be unpleasant for him, but he wants to do the right thing and have it, if that makes sense. And what's interesting about this little sequence is that you might have thought earlier in the season, oh, you hope that they're going to have a heart-to-heart and maybe there'll be kind of a healthier relationship coming out of them at the end of the season. That'll be the arc of this friendship repairing itself by the end or whatever. And that's not what they give you here. What they gave you here was Langdon actually being the one who blows up in Robbie's face a little bit. And Robbie does not like blow up back, which is something that he would have done earlier in the season for sure, right? He would have gotten angry, he would have stood his ground a bit more. Here, he doesn't, and I think it's because he knows Langdon's right about almost about everything he's saying, where Langdon says, hey, when I was in rehab, I saw lots of people just like you. The only difference is you haven't admitted you've got a problem yet. And it's this idea that he's effectively accusing Robbie of also having an addiction problem. It's just not the same type of addiction as what, you know, it's not a physical substance addiction, but it's something that he has to get through and something he has to deal with. So Langdon says, hey, I'm doing the process. I'm doing the steps. I'm done everything the right way. And we've seen this ourselves throughout the episode. We saw the most embarrassing it can possibly get is him having to pee in front of someone. So he is doing it. So when he says that and sort of says, why are you still raiding me? Why are you still giving me shit? It has some weight to it because we have seen it. We have seen this, and Robbie has been giving shit to you and other people throughout this season, and it is actually kind of, he deserves a little bit of this in return. And he also says you hold yourself to too high standards. You want us to be perfect. And he's like, well, I never claimed I was perfect. It's like, well, no, but you think you should be perfect, and you beat yourself up because you're not perfect, and that's a problem. So yeah, I mean, it's getting to the core of Robbie as a character, but from them as a pair, it was very interesting to have them confront each other, still have it be kind of heated and emotional, although not in like a super angry way, more in a, it was a more like thoughtful anger, I guess, from Langdon, but it was more nuanced, and it came out with him walking out as the one who made the accusations that kind of were ringing true. It was a bit more interesting, perhaps, than the obvious thing they could have done. Although, obviously, I still kind of want to see them in a better place by next season, or during next season, or whatever we're doing. So, now, very interesting. There's also a sweet scene with Langdon watching the fireworks with Mel, who sort of says, hey, that was pretty... well, she doesn't even know about it. He just mentions that he did that fancy neck move last episode. Which is also something he brought up with Robbie. He's like, hey, you told me to do that. Like, it's almost like he was thinking, oh, like, if I mess this up and paralyze this poor person, is this something Robbie can then throw back in my face? And Robbie says it was kind of like a trial by fire thing, and sometimes that's how you do, how you learn something. And he's like, oh, is that how you teach now? It feels like Langdon has got his confidence back enough that he's actually kind of challenging, like, maybe some questionable decisions that Robbie's made. But maybe that's a good thing almost. Like that's where you want Langdon to be, is strong enough to be able to challenge Robbie, which is what Robbie maybe needs more than he would like to admit, is someone who can call him out, which is obviously something that Dana does a lot, but another doctor to call out the actual decisions he's making in there. So I there's good stuff there. There's good nuance to this relationship, and Robbie's a character for sure. And yeah, the moment with Mel's quite sweet, and it plays off Mel's, her sister's staying at her boyfriend's place, and she wants to be called by his parents and stuff like that. But it's a sweet little scene. Just sticking with Mel, I guess the two things to mention is when she comes back in, Robbie and the lawyer have to talk to her because they want to give her another deposition. And the way that she just looks over when she sees who it is that wants to talk to her, because she knows exactly what it means, the look on her face and the noise she makes is so funny and kind of adorable in a sad way, but it was really funny. So I'm not mad. It was a really sweet little moment. And then the other thing, of course, is Wells complaining about the day and Santos keeps falling asleep. There wasn't a lot of Santos this episode, actually. She's a couple of memorable little bits, but all of her dramatic stuff's already happened by this point in the season. She's mainly sleepy, but she does ask Mel if she wants to go out for a drink, specifically to maybe some karaoke. And honestly, Santos might be the most likable she's ever been in this episode, because the bullshit that she usually does is dropped. She's at kind of her most weakest, and she just kind of wants to be friendly with someone, and she asks Mel out, and they go, and not on a date, I just mean out as an after work, and she's quite nice about it. She's complimentary of her sister, and then the mid-credit scene where Mel and Santos are singing karaoke to Alanis Morissette, and they're being terrible, and even Mel whips her hair around a little bit, although Santos has to grab her hairband and pull it off in the middle of the song to get her to do it. It's funny, and it's kind of humanizing for both of them. It's like Santos like looking a bit silly, feels kind of nice for her to kind of let her hair down. And then on the flip side of that, Mel letting her hair down because she's so uptight, which is different than Santos, but it feels kind of neat that they're both kind of just letting things off the hook a little bit. As far as I know, the actress who plays Santos is actually a very, very good singer, and she's like professionally sung. I think they did a good choice here of not having her be amazing. Like just sing like a regular drunk person and just go with it. I think was the right choice. Yeah, and plus they're both there, of course, for the scene in the roof where everyone's watching the fireworks. Which I have to mention that actually because it's a very little bittersweet sequence where a lot of the staff who are still around have been up to the roof and they're watching the July 4th fireworks. It's a good sequence. Perla kind of like gets a little upset, and Dana comforts her, but everyone just kind of watches, and it's not like a happy scene, right? It's a very kind of bitter, like after the long day they've had, after the there's this idea that these fireworks are all going off celebrating the country, but like they're sort of living with the reality of what's going on during the day, and they've seen so much throughout this day between people not being able to afford their healthcare, between ICE showing up and taking one of their own employees away. They're like, like, and then seeing like all this happy celebration with fireworks, it just feels a little bit disingenuous, I think. And I think there's kind of a very bittersweet feeling as they're all watching the fireworks here. So really well shot scene, I thought, was that. But anyway, elsewhere, Samira Mohan, So I guess we can talk about this now because like we're now finished with the season, and that is that she is confirmed not to be back in season 3, or I should be more specific and say she's not going to be a regular in season 3. I suppose it's possible they might have her guest star for an appearance. Maybe she pops in to get something or whatnot. The funny thing is, though, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be permanent if they say it's just her day off, because it is only going to be set in one day. They could totally have her back in a 4th season if they really wanted to. But, I was a little critical, in the first half of the season. It felt like she was maybe getting a little bit less material to work with. And then they gave her some stuff in the last few episodes where we're, the guy that came back and, is in tough conditions and all that, and she was feeling guilty, and obviously the little bit we've had throughout with her mother calling her and whatnot. But the biggest thing really is that Robbie, every time he's tried to comfort her or be a mentor, has been a dick. And even when he tries to be nice, he ends up saying something that just makes her feel worse. So the only real payoff we get to that is a one scene between them where he tries to talk to her again about what she's going to do, and asking if everything's been sorted out with her mother, and it's a little bit underwhelming, I think. But it's the weird thing is that it's more underwhelming knowing she's not going to be here next season, and maybe never again. Like if this is her last episode of the show, this feels like a really lukewarm, like kind of nothing to end on. Is her kind of just saying, hey, because she basically says stuff that other people have said to Robbie, which is, hey, we kind of need you to come back. We need you here, even if sometimes you're a dick. And that's kind of the end of the scene. And it's like, okay, maybe they're going for this idea that even the person who he's accidentally been the worst to all season is still asking that for him to come back. Okay, maybe there's a sweetness to that, and I can appreciate that from Robbie's side of it, but it just kind of feels like she didn't get I think part of the reason why I said it's a spoiler to even mention that casting news happened, and if you want to avoid it, because maybe there's going to be a big dramatic exit in the final episode or something, but there's not. It's just the end of the day, and that's just all it is. But I think it feels worse because we know she's not here next season, and this might actually just be the last time we ever see her, and that feels a little bit weird. So yeah, a little bit underwhelming with her ending, and it's a shame because I like the character quite a bit, but it is what it is. Elsewhere, Whitaker is agreeing to look after Robbie's stuff, although he's not going there tonight. He's actually going to the farm girl's place. In fact, we see her show up in her truck with her son, and Whitaker takes the driver's seat and drives off, and it's kind of weird just seeing him. Look, he's got like a family now all of a sudden. And whether or not that's a good thing, because it's kind of this family he's just kind of slid into after the father/husband died, is kind of weird. So maybe that's something we'll return to talking about in season 3. I expect it is, but he puts on some music to cheer up the kid, and they drive off, and he actually leaves much earlier in the episode than most of the other characters do. Although we do see who's got his badge. Digby, the homeless man, stole it. He's wearing it as he's walking through the park under the fireworks. So we get a little joke ending to that, which was nice. Javadi, and talking to, I think it is Whittaker she's talking to, where she basically gets the idea, or Whittaker actually just says the idea, maybe she would prefer mental health as opposed to physical health. This idea that she, because she's basically saying how, like, oh, being here has made her think that she maybe doesn't want to be around or do this as a career anymore, because, and she basically just lists all the characters and says, oh, Robbie's having some sort of midlife crisis, Langdon's an addict, Mackay, she had like an ankle bracelet on last season, and basically just lists like all the characters and all the existential crisis or messed up lives they have, or I think she even says that Samira like doesn't have like a personal life. In fact, half the people who work here don't have personal lives. And Whittaker kind of eventually gets to the idea that, well, maybe mental health is, what you think is in, because she says something like, oh, it's made me realize how important our mental health is, both the patients and ours. And that's when he says, well, why don't you look into that if you have a passion for it? And she's like almost about to dispute it, and then she stops and thinks about it. And then she brings it up to Robbie in a small moment. And one of the things we've had with Robbie this season is him kind of saying, Javadi's got a lot of potential, and, I don't want her to flounder. So when she says, hey, I was thinking maybe of specializing in mental health, he just says, that's a great idea. And she's like, well, I was asking if you think I could do it. And he's like, yeah, that you could do anything you put your mind to. And he calls her Victoria, he uses her full first name, and even compliments her videos, because she thinks he's about to chastise, and she's explaining what she was doing last episode. And he's like, hey, I looked at some of your videos, I think they're great. Just wait until after your shift, blah blah blah. And it's a nice little, it's him apologizing, and it's not the best apology in the world, but he's trying, and it definitely goes better than it did with Samira. So take the wins where you can get them. I should also mention as well that at the start of the episode, we see that Abbott and the night shift crew have their own little like mantra. They call themselves the Night Crawlers, and they have the late shift because all the weirdo creatures of the night are like out, but we're here because we're even weirder and more creepy than they are, or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was amusing. It was fun, and it's so funny because I keep seeing people saying they want a night shift season, right, or a night shift spin-off, and I don't know if it's a good idea. And I think the reason why it's not a good idea is because I think the reason why they're so appealing, I think the reason why a lot of these night shift characters as a crew seem really fun to see when we get them in action throughout most of this episode, and they're the ones doing more of the medical stuff, is because we don't get that much of them. I think that's what makes them feel kind of special. Now, obviously, there's always room for a bit more Abbott because he's a very fleshed out character, but a lot of the others, they pop in, and one of them is joining the main cast next season, so I suspect we're going to see more of her. Ellis, I think her name is, if I remember correctly. But like would we like seeing 15 full episodes of Dr. Shen? I don't know. His shtick might not, sustain that amount of time. But seeing these like glimpses at the start and the end of the season, getting a little bit of this here or there, I think that's what makes them feel kind of fun. And they can have a sort of fun gimmick like having their Nightcrawler mantra, because it's like, hey, it's just fun because we're not spending the same amount of time with them, so they can just have some fun gimmicky things. I don't know. I'm not sure if the night shift season is a good idea personally. Maybe you could start the season a couple of hours early so we see a little bit more of them ending their shift. Maybe like something bad happened during the night, so all the day shift people are coming in to chaos. Maybe that's how you start one of the seasons, so you get a bit more of the night shift people at the start. That could be fun, but I'm just not sure if like giving them a full season as the main crew is necessarily a good idea. Now, if they decide to do it, I'll obviously it may be good, and I'll give it a chance, and I'm sure they'll have some fun ideas of how to do it. And I bet they probably have one or two of the day shift people move to night shift. In the same way that Mateo moved, I could see like, oh well, we're going to have at least one or two characters we're used to be around. But anyway. Fun all the same though. It gave me a good chuckle. But anyway, to go back to Robbie, and I'm just sort of scanning the cast to make sure I've not, because I don't think like we already mentioned Cassie's main scene really. Dana had one important scene actually where she kind of she grabbed a couple of police officers who were taking like an injured patient away back to the police station, and she basically just like grabbed them and said, "You're taking these kits from the safe. Like these are supposed to be picked up," and gives them an absolute chewing out about these being left behind and no one picking them up. And even though they're like, you know, I don't know if they're homicide detectives or what, it's clearly not what they're here for, but they're like, you know what, we'll sign for them, we'll take them, we'll put them into, like, we'll make sure they get where they're going. So it's just fun seeing Dana take that kind of initiative and like not taking no for an answer is kind of fun. But to go back to Robbie, right? Because obviously we talked about your scene with Langdon, we talked about your scenes with Javari, with Alashime, with Abbott, everyone. Like he runs the gambit of scenes throughout the episode. It comes to an end with the baby, the Jane Doe, right, who's been there since like episode 1. And now Dana does go around asking all the staff if they would consider adopting a baby because something to do with them being part of the staff or something. I don't know. The reason for I skimmed past, but I think people are taking this ending where Robbie goes in and like, you know, coddles the baby and gets kind of emotional and says, "Oh, you've got your future ahead of you. You've got a life ahead of you, and it's going to be great. You're going to be just fine. I was abandoned when I was 8," so on and so on. I think some people are immediately jumping to, is he adopting the baby? I don't know if that's the healthiest thing for him. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think he's having this sweet moment where he talked about so many lives being lost in his presence. I think this was him going in to this innocent baby and this being a life that's just starting. This is a new life, and him sort of getting something out of that. And basically being able to say some of the things that maybe he wouldn't be able to say about himself or to anyone else. That's what this was. I don't think we're starting next season and finding out that he's adopted a baby and he's now a single father on top of being, you know, the attending at the Pitt. Like, I don't think that's where this is going. I think that would be almost a betrayal to the more grounded style of this show. That's the sort of thing that would happen in a more kind of like typical TV writing type show. For this to sort of feel like it's still kind of real, which is kind of the vibe that it's going for, it wants to feel authentic, it wants to feel like these are real people, I don't think him just choosing to adopt this baby makes any sense. And I think that's the sort of thing where this is just exactly the type of moment that like a large group of a fandom just immediately jumps to the most like generic and but equally kind of insane conclusion that this is an adoption thing that's about to happen. I don't think it is. They might prove me wrong, and if they do prove me wrong, I might critique it for doing something a little bit far-fetched. But I think this was very therapeutic, and this is the moment that we choose to end on. And I think it's a very cool moment to end on this, and not him leaving with the wonder of, oh, is he actually going on a sabbatical? Because that's the thing, like, coming out of this, like, can he really go if he doesn't think Dr. Al's capable of, like, replacing him for 3 months? Is that something he can even do? I know, I think I heard that the time jump from seasons 2 to 3 is only going to be 3 or 4 months. It's going to be a shorter time. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is that because it's a teaching hospital, technically characters, if we were actually jumping a year every time, a lot of the characters should be moving on to other places, other hospitals, other, you know, vocations. So as a method to keep a lot of the cast, you only make it a short time jump so that we're still kind of in the same span of time. Now, it may still already be an unrealistic amount of time, because by the time another 4 months has passed, that'll be over a year for some of these characters who are, you know, maybe should have moved on somewhere else, but obviously we want the characters to return though, right? I mean, most of them you absolutely want back, and you don't really want to lose anyone for the most part. I'm sure everyone has an opinion of someone they could be willing to lose, or they've got 2 or 3 that, no, these 3 must stay. This must be the 3 that stay here. I'm going to be mad at the show. I'm sure everyone's got different opinions of that. But generally speaking, I don't want to lose anyone because I want to see the relationships continue to grow. I want to see the continuing growth between Robbie and Langdon and Santos. I want to see that. Or the weird friendship between Mel and Santos that might be starting now. And the weird brother sisterness of Whitaker and Santos, or you know, all of many of these things that we are kind of exploring, and those relationships being such a big part of it is why it does matter that a lot of the characters stick around. So yeah, I'm excited to see kind of like where we go with a lot of these characters in season 3. And unlike everyone else, I have to actually wait the time this time, presumably, because you know, I finished season 1 a week before season 2 started. So I've basically had a continuous 30-week experience of the Pitt. I don't get to just go into season 3, so I have to get used to that. So, which is good in a sense, though, because one of the things about consistent yearly TV, which is an art that's almost been lost at this point, because so many shows now are like, here's 8 episodes, okay, we'll see you in 4 years for season 2, which I'm so frustrated with that being like the normal model now, is that this has been consistent so far. It was January, season 1, January, season 2. So all expectations would be around January next year would be when we get season 2, give or take, or season 3, sorry, give or take. And it'll be nice to come into it and feel like I've missed those characters. One of my favorite things of old network TV shows, when network TV made stuff that I liked, you know, before it was just nothing but NCIS and Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and so on, is that, yeah, when you watch the season of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was especially notable because it was set around the school year, is that, yeah, you'd feel like you spent the summer away from these characters, and it was so great to have them back in the following season. It was like coming home again. And it's nice that at least something's close to emulating that, of like feeling like you're back with these characters again after an absence. So I'm looking forward to that feeling when we get to the start of season 3. But there you go. That's the Pitt. I mean, as far as like my thoughts as a whole for the season, it's an interesting comparison between the seasons. It's a very interesting comparison because I think there's strengths and there's weaknesses to both, and I think in some ways I respect season 2 more for being a little bit more nuanced, because it doesn't have the big dramatic mass casualty incident which season 1 had, and that's not that was a problem or a mistake. They absolutely should have done that. Should they have done it in season 1? I don't know, but that was such an obvious big like dramatic thing to do that it almost took a lot more intricate writing to make season 2 feel like it was living up to that without doing just the same thing again. And the way I would describe it is that it was kind of a death by 1,000 cuts, where all these little things really bubbled emotionally, at least for some of the main characters. The downsides is that maybe season 1 handled the ensemble a little bit better, whereas this season it kind of felt like, you know, Robbie got the lion's share, then Dana, and then Langdon and Santos get a pretty reasonable amount. After that, though, it feels like all the other characters, like, they're there, they have good scenes most episodes, but it does kind of feel like they take these like breaks where they don't really have much for their story for like 4 episodes in a row, and then you get a little bit, and they've all had something by the end. But you know, something like Mel and her deposition, right? They set up that she's worried about her deposition, and she has like a couple of funny scenes of her being worried. But you know, it's not until like what was that, episode 8 or something like that, before we got to that episode 9. So we spend that, and then after the deposition, you know, like she had some good scenes and episodes on either side of it, but it kind of felt like there wasn't necessarily as much like time spent with her specifically on an even basis throughout the season. And you kind of felt that a little bit, I think. Definitely with Samira, I definitely felt. I think Cassie, interestingly, probably had a decent amount of stuff overall, although it was a little bit more like spread out. It was like from a plot perspective, like in season 1, like so much of her stuff tied into either her ankle bracelet or her feelings on the kid who might hurt people, right? That was the big thing she was involved in season 1. This season, it kind of feels like she was like dipping in and out and doing stuff with other characters, like almost like a rotating basis. Like, you know, there was the cancer patient who was dying, and that was her and Javadi. You had her getting more involved with what was going on with like, you know, Langdon, by like talking to him about his addiction problems, and like it felt like she sort of dipped neatly into a lot of the other plot lines. Whereas I wouldn't say that, say, like Samira got. I mean, obviously she's in scenes with other characters when they're just in the same room, like dealing with a patient or something like that. But in terms of actually having like moments where something came out, not all the characters got to have that with everyone, and didn't necessarily feel like they had as much focus as some other characters. There's always going to be a little bit of a tipping scale, because I mean, obviously, Robbie absolutely got the most in season 1 as well, but I think it was a bit more even overall. Season 2 was a bit more lopsided towards a few characters, especially Robbie. It's hard to argue with it too much, though, when the quality of those scenes, the quality of the acting and the plot that he's in is so good, though. So it's hard to get mad at it and too much, right? And Dana had a lot of stuff, of course. And we did have new characters who, you know, they're all gone by the final episode, funnily, but we spent a lot of time with Joy and Ogilvy, and I think both of those did get better throughout the season. They both got more interesting, they both had very different viewpoints, and had more dramatic stories, and Ogilvy arguably ended up having the better story, even though I think I like Joy more as a character, which is an interesting comparison. Emma was just a straight win. Emma was a great addition. She was, you know, the young nurse, everything's new to her, and we play with people, making her feel vulnerable. We played with her sympathy and her empathy towards people, which was very sweet and very human. All that stuff was good. So, yeah. And of course, Alashime as well as a new character. I almost forgot to mention her. It's almost like because she was so high up the totem pole, because she was kind of equal in role to Robbie, I almost didn't even think of her as new. I just thought of her as like always being there, which is maybe its own compliment in a weird way. But regardless, all the new characters that stuck around most of the season, I think were solid additions, which is nice. So, yeah. That's the Pitt. That is season 2, all done and dusted, and it was pretty damn good. You know, I think in some ways, like I said, the character writing been a bit more nuanced to like do this like death by 1,000 cuts. Feels a little bit more impressive, even if there's some things that are arguably better in season 1 in other avenues. But yeah, I might like season 2 more overall though, just because we care more about the characters by this point. We know them a bit better. And that is one of the strengths of TV versus movies, is that you can really build your relationship with all the characters in a way that stuff just has so much more meaning, even just by the end of a second season of a TV show, because you've spent, you know, 30 hours, I mean, they're not a full hour each, but, you know, even 20 hours with all these people is so much more than even an entire movie trilogy, that it's unparalleled, like seeing all their different cases they're dealing with and how it's piling up over the day and so on. It's just one of the benefits of the format. So yeah, that is me. That is my thoughts on the Pitt season 2 and the finale. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Thanks to everyone who already does, but it does make everything possible. And you get access to all the bonuses for the movie content, which is Mail Fuzz Movies. That's a separate YouTube channel. All the podcasts are over there. Go check that out if you dare. But that is me. So thank you once again. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?